Hello, everyone. Hello. Just trying to adjust here. Okay. So, welcome. My name is Jenna Pacelli. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California and Oregon. And I am a trauma specialist. So, I love working with and supporting people who are suffering from trauma, but also chronic patterns of stress. So, we're going to be talking today about a new definition of trauma and stress. Like, what's the new conceptualization? What is the newest, most updated definition of trauma? And then how do we and then how are traumatic memories formed? So if you're joining me live, it's so good to have you. And I'm both live on Instagram and live in my Facebook group. And my Facebook group is called Find Your Freedom. So I'm all about helping people find their freedom from stress and trauma, finding health freedom, financial freedom, time and location freedom. I'm all about freedom. So yeah, today that's what we're going to be talking about. This is study session number 1. I'm going to be having study sessions in my groups and on Facebook and Instagram every week. So stay tuned to find those and for as I announce those. So what is trauma? Trauma is any overwhelming experience that the brain and the body and the nervous system have trouble processing or integrating. Okay. In the past, the old definition of trauma was that it only included what we call big T trauma. So things like car accidents, things like sexual assault, things like natural disasters, right? And the problem with that definition is that that definition of trauma does not address all the experiences that people go through that can either accumulate and can feel like a big T trauma or be enough and be stressful enough that it has the same impact on their body and nervous system as a big T trauma. So little T trauma is the other piece of the working definition of trauma that we've been missing, which is things like experiencing racism, experiencing sexism, minor car accidents, minor falls, medical procedures, especially if they involve anesthesia. And we'll talk in the future about why that would be. But anesthesia, in short, as an example, puts the body into an artificial freeze response. And so we're going to talk more about that. Being left at school. I remember being left at school once, and I remember it for the rest of my life. I think I'm okay from it, but some people, like, that could be super stressful, and especially in a child brain, right? Children do not process trauma in the same way, stress and trauma, because they don't have the resources that adults do, right? So things like other examples of little T traumas could be things like an emotionally abusive or emotionally just irresponsible parent, a disengaged parent, being bullied, being rejected by others. Okay, so there's lots of examples. And the important piece to remember is that trauma and stress are subjective. So what may feel traumatic to me might not feel stressful or traumatic to somebody else. Okay, so what both of the big T traumas and little T traumas have in common with one another is that the brain, the reason that we develop trauma symptoms is that the brain is not able, for various reasons, to process those experiences and come through the other side. Okay, so we are we don't, and the other piece of that is that it lives in the body. It's a subjective somatic. So somatic comes from the root word of soma, which means body, which is also my specialty, which is working somatically with trauma resolution. So there's an imprint in the body that we remember, and the memory will live in the body. So we don't have to even know, like in the cases of early childhood or pre-verbal, before we were able to speak, right? In the cases of pre-verbal early developmental trauma, usually there's not a verbal connection, or there's not a connection from what's happening in the body and how stressful that thing was to the verbal part of the brain that's able to then produce words to express that, right? So if something happened to us, we can feel very stressed, or like a baby can feel very stressed and not be able to express it or make sense of it in any kind of verbal way, and it's going to be processed and stored in the body in particular ways because of that. Okay, so a healthy memory, so coming into what healthy memory is versus traumatic memory, and the difference there, or a healthy memory, is just a memory that is updated. So it's like updating our phone's software, right? Memories need to be updated. So as I have a new experience, like I live in Bend, Oregon, and every time I go outside my house, I have a new experience that gets layered on top of the old experiences of walking outside my house, right? That is a healthy, so it's able to be updated. So like if I haven't updated my phone, because I just didn't feel like doing it, and I have a iPhone 4, right? The software updates, if I'm trying to update that now, are not going to work, right? And so whenever we have a healthy memory, it doesn't have to be factually true in order for it to be healthy. It just has to be updatable, okay? So this is also how you could have 5 different people at the scene of, let's say, a car accident, and you ask them all in a court of law what they saw. They could all have a different perspective based on where they were standing and have 5 different stories completely. Okay, it's not that they're lying necessarily, it's that is what they saw and what they remember. And what we know in the neuroscience research is that that doesn't mean that they're lying, but it means that people can have different truths, okay? And that our memory is highly susceptible to mistakes, essentially, okay? So understanding that a trauma memory is one that is not being updated, okay? And there's the mind aspect, and there's the body aspect, because the trauma really lives in the body, okay? So we can access traumatic memory when we work at the body-based level. However, there's going to be different thoughts, feelings, images, movements the body wants to make that are all going to be connected in to that traumatic memory. And so healthy memory is updatable. Unhealthy, we shouldn't really say unhealthy, but traumatic memories that are going to give people symptoms, are not being updated in the neurophysiology, okay? And so it gets stuck on repeat, right? This is why like in classic PTSD, we can have a image that is flashing over and over again, okay? Or why we could continue I call it the dating the same person in a different body phenomenon, right? We tend to date, until we do the healing work, the same kind of person in a different body over and over again with the same kinds of patterns that are going to show up, okay? So this is all ways in which we're going to have repeated behavioral repercussions of not healing from stress and trauma, right? Okay, so this is what this means is that we often think that we are making conscious choices, that we are being rational, that we are being aware and awake, and we often, in reality, are operating mostly out of habit, mostly out of these imprints, And then our brains will do, our neocortex, the frontal lobe, will then rationalize that pattern and that decision after the fact. Okay, so most of our decision making is emotional and body based and a habit, unless we do something about it, right? So we want to go back to, so there's two other kinds of memories that I want you to understand. There's implicit memory, which is emotional. It's procedural, it's automatic, it's unconscious, right? And it's the same system we use when we talk about riding a bike, right? It's our body-based imprint memory that we are writing. Okay, so that's implicit memory. And explicit memory is narrative. It's a declarative, autobiographical story of our life, cognitive frontal lobe memory. Okay, and it's more factual. It's more episodic. It's content. Again, it's the story. And so we're looking at different parts of the brain that are operating. So implicit memory, if this is a model of our brain, is the lower parts of the brain, the brainstem into the nervous system. And the explicit parts of our memory are the neocortex, the newest part of the brain, the rational, more cognitive parts of the brain. So when we're looking at what kinds of therapy we need to treat these things, we have to understand what we are looking to get at, right? Usually when we're looking at it and going at it from a neocortical or cognitive level, we're not addressing what's happening underneath that is causing the patterns to begin with. Okay, so this is why my specialty and what I love doing is working with people who have had a lot of talk therapy, and I'm trained as a talk therapist. It's very useful in a lot of ways, but they're not getting where they need to go, right? They're not making the progress. They're still, right? It's like still a slog, still a grind, okay? And we have to be more creative with that. We need to access the other parts of their brain, okay? And so we have implicit memory, body-based, emotional, amygdala, fight, flight, freeze memory, and then we have explicit, declarative, autobiographical, narrative, story of your life memory, okay? So let's see. Okay, so I'm trained in somatic experiencing. I do some brain spotting and EMDR as well. And there's different channels of our experience, and in different modalities they call it different things. Doesn't matter. We're going to call them, in EMDR they call them nodes. Okay, so if you've got your 5 fingers here, we have different associations. If this is like a trauma-based memory, okay, trauma memory here, it's not being updated. Usually there's going to be associated channels of our experience that go with that. So imagery, sensation, behavior, which is the movements your body wants to make, affect, and meaning, or the thoughts that you have about it, the meaning that you make about it. Okay, so we can access traumatic memory from any of those nodes, from any of those receptor sites, right? Or any of those, it's like docks at a harbor, okay? You can access the same dock at 5 different locations, right? So we have to know how to work with the channels of our experience, the ways in which our experience shows up, and they're connected to the memory that is the issue that is stuck in the body, right? And so the goal in this work then is to renegotiate the memories and the ways in which the body is holding the trauma, okay? So again, the trauma, and I'll get to this in other videos, other study sessions, which is trauma is a stuck physiological response that hasn't been able to complete itself. So as we work through these different parts of our experience, we are going to start to be able to renegotiate and pull those out. It's like stretching taffy out. We're going to open it up, slow it down, renegotiate that, and then reconsolidate that memory. Okay? So that's what traumatic memory is. I'll talk more about this in the future. So this is study session number 1. Would love to continue to connect with you. I'm streaming over on Facebook. If you're on Instagram, I'm over on Facebook in my group, which is called Find Your Freedom. Okay, with Jenna Pacelli. Feel free to join that group. I'll link to it in my bio. And then on Instagram, Jenna Pacelli Therapy and at Jenna Pacelli. So I will be in here every week sharing with you, and we'll have these study sessions together. I also have free guides on my website at jennapacelli.com that are totally free, and you can go download things about self-care, deep meditation, essential oils, things like that. So see you soon, and it was great to be with you. Bye.